Welcome back. We've made it to the final part of our series on political philosophy and leadership. And honestly, we've saved one of the most incredible minds for last. Today, we are diving into the world of Ibn Khaldun. We're talking about a thinker from the 14th century whose ideas about how civilizations work might just explain the very headlines you're reading this morning.
I mean, it's the biggest question in all of history, isn't it? Why do great powers emerge, and why do they always fall? Well, what if I told you that over 600 years ago, a thinker claimed he had found the formula, the actual social physics that governs the destiny of every nation? That is exactly what Ibn Khaldun set out to prove.
So, here's how we're going to break down his amazing theory. First, we'll look at the man who found this formula of history. Then we'll get into the engine that drives it all, this key concept called asabiya. After that, we'll walk through the 5 stages every single state goes through, look at the make-or-break role of the leader, and finally, wrap it all up with his vision of history as one big, repeating cycle.
Right, so Ibn Khaldun, born way back in 1332, wasn't just some philosopher locked in a tower. He was out there in the world, a politician, a judge, a historian. And he looked at history differently. For him, it wasn't just a list of random events. No, it was a science. And his big idea? He said you have to look at the state like a living thing. You know, it's born, it grows up, it gets old, and then it dies. It's an unavoidable life cycle.
Okay, let's get into the absolute core of his thinking. Because if you want to understand Ibn Khaldun, you have to understand this one single word, asabiya. This idea is the engine of his entire philosophy. It's the secret sauce that builds and ultimately breaks civilizations.
So, what on earth is it? Think of asabiya as the ultimate social glue. It's that group solidarity, that intense feeling of us. It's a shared purpose and a fierce loyalty that binds people together so tightly they are willing to fight and even die for one another. Without this stuff, you just can't build a state. And this feeling, this asabiya, it grows in stages. It starts with the most basic human connection, right? Family, blood ties. Then, as the group gets bigger, it expands into a wider tribal or ethnic identity. But its final, most powerful form, the form that can build empires, is a unity of belief. A shared religion or ideology that can get millions of people aiming for the exact same goal, creating their own state. Okay, so this brings us to the million-dollar question. This force, asabiya, it's this raw, powerful, hungry energy that forges a state through struggle and conquest. But what happens to all that energy once the fight is over? What happens when the victors are no longer warriors, but rulers sitting comfortably on a throne?
And this is where Ibn Khaldun's theory takes a really tragic, almost fatalistic turn. His answer is it dies. The very success that asabiya creates is exactly what poisons it. Once the state is built, that tough solidarity starts to crack. People get comfortable, and the decay sets in. And for Ibn Khaldun, this isn't just likely, it's inevitable. Nothing can stop.
Now, this inevitable decay, it's not random or chaotic. Nope, it follows a very predictable pattern. So let's get into what is maybe his most famous idea, the 5 stages of a state's life cycle. So the cycle starts with victory. A group with powerful asabiya takes over and builds their new state. Next comes despotism, where the new ruler grabs all the power for himself, often pushing away the very people who helped him get there. Then you get to stage 3, tranquility. This often looks like a golden age, right? Lots of money, big building projects, peace and prosperity. But that leads to stage 4, contentment. Things are calm but stagnant. Everyone's just kind of imitating the past. And from there, it's a straight shot down to the final stage, wastefulness. The government is corrupt, everyone's focused on luxury, the money runs out, and the whole thing becomes hollowed out, just waiting to fall over.
You know what's so wild about this is that 3rd stage, tranquility. It feels like the peak, doesn't it? It's what every society wants. Wealth, art, security. But for Ibn Khaldun, this very comfort is a trap. It's what plants the seeds of decay. It makes people soft, and it just completely erodes that tough, gritty solidarity that built the whole thing in the first place.
So if this whole cycle is inevitable, you might be asking, well, does it even matter who's in charge? And Ibn Khaldun's answer is a resounding yes, absolutely. In fact, the character of the ruler can massively speed up or slow down this whole process. The fate of the state, for a time, rests right on their shoulders.
He couldn't be more direct about this. For Ibn Khaldun, the state is basically just a mirror reflecting its leader.
A ruler's personal qualities, their virtues or their vices, they don't just stay personal. They ripple out and define the health of the entire nation. A good leader can really put the brakes on that decay, while a bad one just hits the accelerator.
And this just lays it all out, doesn't it? A compassionate ruler, they inspire real love, real loyalty. Their people will go to the wall for them. But a harsh, tyrannical ruler, they only create fear. Their people learn to lie and cheat just to get by, and the second things get tough, they will abandon that ruler in a heartbeat. That kind of leadership just rots the state from the inside out.
But here's a really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive idea he had. Ibn Khaldun argued that being too smart can actually be a problem for a ruler. Why? Well, because a super clever leader tends to overthink things, to micromanage, and to burden their people with complicated plans. They get what we might call analysis paralysis. For Ibn Khaldun, a leader's job wasn't to be the smartest person in the room, it was to be wise. And wisdom meant moderation in everything, even in intellect.
So what does a good ruler look like? Well, it's a list of virtues that are pretty much timeless. Generosity and justice, they build trust. Keeping your word creates stability. You protect the vulnerable, they listen to the smart people, the scholars. And critically, you have to learn the lessons of history so you don't repeat the same mistakes. A good ruler isn't just a boss, they're a caretaker of the entire nation's well-being.
All right, let's put all these pieces together now. When you combine that idea of asabiya rising and falling with those 5 stages of the state, you get to Ibn Khaldun's truly revolutionary vision of how history itself actually works.
And this quote pretty much sums it up. This is his most famous conclusion. While a lot of people see history as this straight line always progressing forward, Ibn Khaldun saw it as a great wheel, just turning and turning in a perpetual cycle. For him, the past isn't just something that happened, it's a pattern that is happening again.
And here is that cycle, that wheel, in action. As one state gets to that final stage of wastefulness and rot, it becomes weak. And while that's happening, somewhere out in the fringes, a new group, tough, united, full of that powerful asabiya, is getting stronger. They see the weakness, they attack, and they topple the old, corrupt government. And then they start the exact same 5-stage journey all over again.
And that brings us right back to where we started, with a pretty heavy question. If Ibn Khaldun's formula is really a universal law of history, well then it has to apply to us, right here, right now. So as you look at the world around you, your own country, other nations, which stage of the cycle do you think we're in? It's a thought that's just as powerful today as it was nearly 700 years ago.